Thank you, Apostle. I just want to continue to talk about the conditions in South Bend that allow a situation where a man like Eric Logan is gunned down in the street. I want to, before we get deeper, I want to address also, you know, some people say, well, he shouldn't have been out. And how do you respond to this, Jesse? Because a lot of people say, or some people say, Eric shouldn't have been out at 3:30 in the morning breaking into cars. Have you heard that?
I've heard that a lot.
Well, so what's your response to that?
Well, I mean, you know what? First off, I have an issue that you need to prove he was breaking into cars.
No DNA. Did you see?
You've got 7 cars and you claim there's no fingerprints and no DNA on any of the 7 cars or the items that they claim were stolen from the cars. So, you know, first off, was he actually breaking into cars? And then my other opinion there is, does a man deserve to die because he's breaking into cars?
And what well, here's the problem. What Jesse was saying, and again, when cases like this happen, and Jesse's been an activist long enough, and Pastor, there's a lot of emotion that comes into play. You have pro-police people. Their knee-jerk response is, hey, it's a black guy, he's got a criminal record, and the police said that he was breaking into cars, so he got what he got. I mean, that's real. We deal with that, okay? The reality is, as Jesse pointed out, first you have to look at the Constitution of the United States. At the very most, he would have been charged with a low-level felony or a misdemeanor, okay? Right. At the very most, okay? So let's say a best-case scenario for people that says he got what he got for breaking in. I mean, it doesn't... The penalty for breaking into a car is not the death penalty. That's first of all, okay? That's first of all. But keep in mind, Eric Logan never saw a jury, never was charged with breaking in, okay? So when someone says, well, you know, he got what he deserved, well, the reality is, there's no evidence, as Jesse, I'm going to read for you, the report again, report on the death investigation, Eric J. Logan, Rick Hurdle, Special Prosecutor. This is not my form, this is the Special Prosecutor form. Page 10, forensic analysis of DNA and latent fingerprints. The Metro Homicide Unit submitted a request to the Indiana State Police Laboratory Division to have a number of items forensically analyzed for the presence of DNA and of latent fingerprints. Prior to submitting said items to the lab, Metro Homicide Unit officers collected DNA buccal swab samples and or blood stain cards for comparison purposes from Mr. Logan, Sergeant O'Neill, K.H., the owner of the purse, and the wallet, L, just using the initials on the faceplate and the trim piece, and E.F., the owner of the knife. The knife and the faceplate were analyzed for the presence of both DNA and fingerprints. There was not sufficient quality DNA for further analysis on either item, nor were there any latent fingerprints of any value. Stop. Eric was supposed to have taken the faceplate out. Then he was supposed to have handled the knife, had it in his hand, and if you recall, the report said that O'Neill looked at Eric and he had a tissue in his hand was bloody. Do you remember seeing that?
Yes.
And it was blood on it.
Yeah, that was all items that immediately jumped out to me. It's like, where's his DNA on the knife? Where's his DNA in the cars? If his hand's bleeding, he's gonna leave DNA somewhere. Or hair, skin samples, there's gonna be something.
Well, if I remember correctly, O'Neill's story of the events as they unfolded did change a little bit.
It changed, yeah.
At one point early on, we were told that Eric Logan came at him with the knife
Right.
above his head,
Right.
you know,
Right.
as if he was coming at him to stab him. And then we're told that he threw the knife at him,
Right.
and so on and so forth. And, you know, I'll be honest, I kind of really was rubbed the wrong way and kind of took offense to the way the special prosecutor explained and justified this, because he said, well, you know, the police officer has a right to defend himself, basically under the, it's not called stand your ground.
Right. Right.
The Castle Law.
Right.
In Indiana,
Right.
the Castle Law.
And it's in here. He
Yeah,
has
it's
his
in
finger
here.
on it.
And I'm gonna say this, the first thing that needs to be proven there is that not only did the officer fear for his life, but was there an adequate reason that he feared for his life? Just because a man's walking toward you, doesn't really, I mean, why would you fear for your life if a man's running at you and you know, or he's attempting to tackle you or something of that nature, or he's pointing a gun in your face? But, you know, that's basically the answer we got. Well, look, that officer's got a right under the Castle Law, just as you, a you know, citizen has, to defend himself. Well, first you, like I said, if it was flip-flopped and it was a citizen that had shot that cop, you can bet that there would have been one hell of a scrutinous investigation
Right.
on why I felt
Somebody would have been
fear
crucified.
for my life.
You know, and I that because one of the things that Eric Logan's family pointed out, and I hadn't even thought about it, because when I came in, you remember, you already had extra cameras set up. What he had was a big picture of the knife.
Yes.
I thought it was going to be a moving display. You know, I thought it was going to be like the knife and the purse and the tissue and
Right, it was only the knife.
you know, a reenactment, a computer reenactment of the shooting, but it was just a static picture of the knife. And I'm thought, because remember, Eric Logan's one of his family said, you have the knife, you don't have the gun, what, you know, and I thought, wow, why is it just it's like a subliminal message. Here's a knife and it's 8 inches. Well, the knife wasn't an 8-inch knife. I mean, the blade,
overall length of it.
yeah, the length was, but the blade was probably 3 or 4 inches, I'm just guessing.
3.5 inches. something
Not
like that.
saying, I'm not discounting that it potential for danger, okay? I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, you're putting up this picture, it's a subliminal message that
Yeah.
the officer had to protect himself. That's what bothered me. That's what bothered me.
Several other people that were at that meeting also brought up a question to me, and they said, look, why was there a state police officer's hat specifically placed right in the middle of a railing in front of the special prosecutor? And these people kind of said that they felt offended. They
Right.
felt like it was a sign or a signal to
Right.
them of this authority force. And they also questioned why there were so many
Oh, there was, when you walk
state
in,
police,
there were 8.
state
yeah,
police,
state police
officers,
officers at route.
and, you know, county police presence.
Lines
There
of
was,
bags.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, enormous police presence. When, to be totally honest, there hasn't been any violent uprisings that would constitute that type of a police showing, to be honest.
There were probably 30, 40 police officers there in total. I know that for a fact there were 8 state police troopers. There were probably 2 dozen,
County
2
officers
county officers.
outside the meeting area and around the back.
Yeah,
the back wall.
there was a very serious police presence, but let's also keep this in mind, okay? Eric Logan, as the report reads, was shot at more than 4 feet away. Okay? When the South Bend Police Department is trained, their training officer states in the report that at 21 feet away from the officer, if you seem to be a threat either to commit a felony against the officer or to hurt the officer, they can kill you. 21 feet! You can run with 21 feet. You can get out of the way with 21 feet. That is just ridiculous. And they say that all this is also transferable over to citizens, normal citizens as well. I can tell you that it doesn't. If there's a way to run, you are supposed to run away from danger.
Actually, there is no, the
No
Indiana
retreat.
law is
You're
written,
required to
there is,
retreat,
you're
yeah.
not required to retreat.
Right.
According to the castle law.
Right.
But stop and think about it. 21 feet would be like saying you're on one side of the street on the curb,
Right.
and the officer's on the other side of a city street on the curb.
Right.
I mean, that's quite
That's a 2 lanes.
quite a distance.
Right.
And if you're someone who is walking towards an officer, not running, walking.
Right, which the report clearly says.
I mean, you know, are you that big of a threat, number one? And number two, you know, you don't have a gun. And, you know, there's other people that said, you know, hey, he threw the knife at him, that's why he shot him. We did hear that story towards the beginning.
Right.
And then people said, well, wait a minute, if he threw the knife, at that point he's unarmed.
Right.
Right.
So why would you say? So there's a ton of questions that really need to be answered, that weren't answered in the report given to us, nor in the verbal conversation.
Well, let me ask you this. So you mean to tell me that these police officers are different from Elkhart County Sheriff's Department, they're different from Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department and all that? They're not trained in hand-to-hand combat?
Well, you know,
They don't have a taser?
Here's the thing. I want to back up here because I don't want to get real complex. I want to stick to what he said. He said Eric Logan is walking towards him. 6'2", knife in his hand.
Right.
Now, whether it's in his hand or raised up, but there are two different stories that O'Neill tells. That the guy came towards him with a knife, and we'll cover that in the report, or he threw a knife at him. So if he threw the knife, he's not a threat. You tase him and whatever, okay? But his story, one of the stories is, in fact, this is what. When asked about, I'm on page 15 of the report. Okay. Sergeant O'Neill's body camera was not activated when he fired 2 shots at Mr. Logan, 1 second apart at 3:31. Okay. And Shot Spotter indicates there were 2 shots within a couple seconds. They couldn't confirm the exact location, okay, but in that area where Eric Logan's mom lived, okay, so not the exact location. All right. A summary of Sergeant O'Neill's body-worn camera recording is it now. Here's the thing. He shot Eric at 3:31. 9 minutes later, at 3:33:03, he activates manually his camera. Okay? Once initiated, Mr. Logan was standing and making groaning type noises while being secured by officers Canariki and Lindsay, which we heard. Officers tried to determine where he was shot and found an injury to his torso, where Sergeant O'Neill stated, "Guy effing threw that knife at me, man." Okay? Additional officers, so we had officers Canariki and Lindsay. Additional officers began to arrive on the scene at approximately 3:34. So you got 3 minutes have gone by. Okay? Officer Nepper, who we'll talk about again, asked, "You think it's best for us just to load and go with him?" Sergeant O'Neill responded, "Yeah, might as well. Throw him in the car. Just get him right to the hospital." Okay? Mr. Logan was led to Officer Nepper's car, parked at the southern end of the parking lot. That's what it says here. So you walk, this guy's been shot.
And they walked him 100 and some feet.
You walk this guy to the southern edge of the parking lot.
When there's squad cars right there up front.
Oh yeah, yeah. At 3:34, another officer asked Sergeant O'Neill about his status. Sergeant O'Neill responded, "Yeah, effort threw that knife at me. He's coming at me with the knife." And I'm like, "Drop the knife," and he effing throws it at me. Yeah, he effing threw a knife at me, so I shot him.
Yeah.
Well,
To me, it sounds like the police officer had a gun or rope and jumped out of the way of the knife.
well, Apostle here. I mean, he had a bruise, a mark. They said it was a mark, a spot on his hand, on his arm, on his forearm. But this is what the camera shows. This is what the report. The camera shows. Yeah, he effing threw the knife at me, so I shot him. The knife is out of his hand. The threat is no longer there. That's what I was saying. I don't want to get into, the policy, the excessive force policy of the South Bend Police. I want what you said here on video. He threw the knife is out of his hand.
Right.
He is no longer a threat.
Where is this video?
My
Because
question
we
is,
were
the radio
told
chatter
they
says
didn't
the
really
same
have
thing.
no video.
Well, the report says here.
And I mean, obviously, once he calls in that shots have been fired, every officer after that fact that comes to the scene, cameras should be activated because they have to be coming with lights and sirens on. If their lights are on, their cameras should be on. So there should have been all kinds of footage from dash cams and body cameras of the other officers once they got to the scene, prior to him being loaded and taken to the hospital.
Okay, I want to continue.
Here's my question.
Go ahead, Pastor.
I remember that, I can't remember where I got it from. I used to have it, the radio chatter from that night.
Oh, we
He
still have it,
says
right.
on the radio,
Guy threw
the
a
guy
knife.
threw a knife at me, I had to shoot him.
Well, and it's confirmed here. They say in this report that there's video. But it gets better. At approximately 3:37, 7 minutes after the shooting, Officer Canariki stated, "I'll stay here and make sure this stuff doesn't move," I guess. He made the statement while standing directly behind the black Honda. An item of evidence was seen lying in the area. At 3:39, Sergeant O'Neill manually muted his body-worn camera.
Yeah.
While speaking with Officer Canariki. He remained on the scene speaking with other officers. At 3:39:21, Officer Canariki manually muted his camera while still speaking with Sergeant O'Neill. Officer Bylinski and Officer Ryan's body cameras were muted throughout the entirety of them being present on the scene. At 3:47, Sergeant O'Neill briefly unmuted, then quickly muted his body-worn camera again. At 3:53, Sergeant O'Neill manually shut his body-worn camera off. When asked by the Indiana State detectives why his body-worn camera wasn't on at the time of shooting, O'Neill stated, "At that time, the policy was different. It's not like the general order out now. So for low-level crimes, something like going through a vehicle isn't required. So when I heard it dispatched, to me it was a low priority call, just something that most of the time we get there, guy's already gone. So, I just assumed there wasn't going to be anyone." When asked why he eventually turned his body camera on, Sergeant O'Neill stated, "I was thinking, holy yes. This went from being the guy rummaging through cars to I just fired my pistol for the first time in my whole career. So I turned my body cam on because I'm like, if I could go back in time just for a low priority call, it did make sense to turn it on. But thinking then, I need to turn it on. So I thought, better get this on and record as much as I can." When asked why he muted his body camera, O'Neill stated, "It was kind of one of those things where the suspect was already gone, the event was over, there's something that had been done. So you kind of look at 1,000 been muted frequently, we might leave it run, but..." Additional South Bend police officers arrived on the scene, also wearing body cams. As no other officer at the scene of the shooting, no officer has recorded the event. The other officer's recording showed Mr. Logan bleeding from his torso while standing behind the black Honda Civic and white Subaru, being loaded, which we heard, being loaded into the back of Officer Knepper's police vehicle, being driven to the hospital, then taken to the emergency department. Additionally, some of the officers' body-worn cameras show the officers securing the process of the scene. Officer Canariki's body-worn camera shows that he indicated he remained on the scene. Now, whoa! He said the guy threw the knife and I shot him. He said. See? Okay. He said it.
Right.
I mean,
So at that point in time, the man's unarmed.
Right. There was no more.
he
there was
threw
no
the
longer a
knife.
threat.
He's got a little red mark. The prosecutor, when he did, the special prosecutor, he said the knife the serrations on the knife was consistent with the wound. So I'm thinking, he got up close and started cutting him. But this says there's a red spot. Yeah.
Just a contusion or something like that on there.
So he threw the knife at me, but there's no DNA
On the knife.
on
Yeah.
the knife.
Yeah, there's nobody's DNA on the knife.
Okay, on the knife, and this directly contradicts what the special prosecutor said. He's walking towards me. I retreat. The few pages over.
But my other question would be, so, there's been a big discrepancy about the policies for the body-worn cameras, okay? And from what I understand, since the incident, there's been a couple changes made. But my question is, so what did the original policy say about an officer shutting his camera off once it was activated, or muting his camera in the middle of such a serious incident? I don't think anybody's even asked that question. I mean, you would think that, you've got an officer shot a civilian and he's got his body camera on and they're talking and he all of a sudden mutes it for some ungodly reason. You would think muting that would violate some kind of policy. I mean, that's crazy.
Well, it is crazy. Apostle, you were saying, go ahead.
If I'm correct, I think that police officer may have had second thoughts about turning off that camera and seeking help.
Yeah, and you know what? Because you shoot the guy, then you turn it on. But he says, well, normally they're turned off because it's just, people are just standing around and there's BS and we may mute it. There's nothing that's going to be used in a prosecution, whatever. But then he turns it back on again. He turns it on and then he mutes it. Then he turns it off. But when he does turn it on, he contradicts his statement. That's what I want people to understand. The statement that the special prosecutor justified the use of deadly force was, the guy kept coming and I retreated. And he wouldn't put the knife down, so I shot him. On video, in the same report, he tells the officers, the guy came at me, he threw a knife at me and I effing shot him.
And he was shot at more than 4 feet. So, I mean, Eric Logan wasn't a threat to him anyway.
Well, he didn't have the knife anymore.
Yeah, he was unarmed.
He was unarmed.
Yeah.
Well, my other question would be, so, when they're driving around in their police cars, their dash cams aren't on.
Yeah.
Right.
Their dash cams aren't on unless they manually activate it or they activate the red and blue lights. I have a problem with that. I mean, I have a problem with that. There are people that claim that the altercation or the original confrontation did not take place in that parking lot.
Well, and to
There were evidence markers across the street, across William Street.
Keep in mind, ShotSpotter saying that they identified the shots, but they weren't specifically in that location in the parking lot.
Well, this is what I'm getting at. There are people that claim that he and his brother had came to his mother's house, who lived in a building kitty corner across William Street. And I've heard from more than one person that supposedly an officer pulled up or approached, whatever, in front of his mother's apartment building, and that supposedly he might have had drugs on him, and he ran to avoid dealing with the police officer, and then he ran across the street into the parking lot. And they said that the officer proceeded to the parking lot in his vehicle, and Eric Logan was supposedly hiding between two vehicles in the parking lot. Now, if you went there and looked at the scene, the officer had to drive down William Street towards the north, turn to the east on whatever the street is to the south of that parking lot, and come in the south end of that parking lot, and then he pulled up behind this car. And so I'm not getting where this whole 4 feet, if he was that close, that means he walked around his squad car.
They kept saying more than 4 feet, more than 4 feet.
Well, I'm just saying.
I know.
From where Eric Logan was inside the door of the vehicle to where that officer's squad car was parked was less than 21 feet to begin with.
Right.
So if the officer exited his squad car and walked around the squad car to even get a good view of what he was looking at, he was probably within
They said it was 8 or something.
within 10 or 12 feet of that gentleman
Exactly.
before the gentleman even knew he was there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, do you approach this guy and startle this guy who's you're claiming is hanging inside of a car? Or do you wait for backup at that point to arrive, which apparently didn't happen? You know.
Well, if you listen to the radio traffic, he says, I'm out with whatever the signal is. I'm out with the subject. And then there's silence. And then you hear the guy effing threw a knife at me and I shot him. He says, I'm out with the guy. And then that. But again, when Mayor Mueller says we need new evidence, then Mayor, you probably want to read the special prosecutor report, because the special prosecutor said on one page that he's walking towards Officer O'Neill.
Right.
And he shot him because he wouldn't drop the knife. And then O'Neill on camera, when he activates his camera, said, the effing guy threw a knife at me, so I shot him.
So that means that O'Neill already assumed the worst. When he showed up, he drew his weapon and had it trained on him to begin with.
Well,
so in the original dispatch, and I can't say that this is true, false, or indifferent because I don't have it here in front of me to listen to. But many people have told me that the clothing that Eric Logan was wearing did not even match the description
That's
given
true.
by dispatchers to the officer
that's true.
for the person that was supposedly breaking in the cars.
That's what we heard, and that's what Eric Logan's brother said.
Right.
Eric Logan's brother had said that they were together on Western Avenue, and he had walked into whatever street it was, out Lafayette.
Close to his mother.
Right, and then his brother walked down. That's what he said. So, the problem is they've lied before. Just hold on a second. Remember I told you about Jonathan Ferguson, the 7-Eleven clerk. Jonathan is mildly retarded. His mom said, and you know his mother, Sister Ferguson, that's his mom. His mom said that when he was young, he was attacked by a pit bull and bit in the head. So he had some mild, I don't want to call it retardation, but he has some mild issues, okay? And a good kid, but he's trusting kid. So when he said they, you know, he tried to tell them about the guy with the alcohol, and they wouldn't do anything. So he makes the report, and they come back and slash his tires. I wanna read something here. Okay. At that time, Lieutenant Lee Ross was the IA investigator during the time that the Cinnamon Challenge happened.
Right.
Okay. Later, Lee Ross, the South Bend Police, said that juveniles had been arrested for slashing the tire. Okay. Captain Phil Trent of the South Bend Police Department appeared on ABC 57 News on the news and said that a juvenile had been arrested for. So you get IA, Lieutenant Ross, and you get Captain Trent saying, appearing in the news. In fact, no juvenile was in custody for the incident that Jonathan Ferguson complained of. Several weeks prior to the incident, two of the same name officers involved in the slashing incident had entered the 7-Eleven, bought coffee and soda, where they challenged Mr. Jonathan Ferguson, who had been diagnosed as ADHD, to take the Cinnamon Challenge. He doesn't. Where he was told that if he would swallow a tablespoon of cinnamon, the officers would give him a coupon for dinner at Applebee's and $30. Okay, he took the challenge, ate the cinnamon, and became very ill, vomiting for hours. He was never given the coupon or the money. One of those officers was Officer Nepper, who did the load and go of Eric O'Neill. We've already seen senior officials, Lieutenant lying about this a tire slashing incident. So if they'll lie about a tire slashing incident, they certainly would lie about an officer murdering.
Now, if you really go back and think about this whole 7-Eleven clerk issue, was there not also an officer that ended up getting reprimanded for going back to that 7-Eleven and trying to retrieve video?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
They altered the video. Jonathan said that when he went to IA, he said they had altered the video. They retrieved the video from 7-Eleven. Jonathan Ferguson said this. They tampered with. So, folks, what we're saying is, we have spent the first hour talking about the corruption. Again, I want to say this, and I can't say this enough. I have friends that are South Bend police officers. We get great service. Sergeant Demler, and who's the supervisor of the area that patrols the church. We love those guys. They look out for us. They look out for the church. We are not indicting all of the South Bend police officers. What we're saying is there are a few corrupt officers. There's certainly a corrupt chief who promotes people like O'Neill, keeps people like O'Neill on the job, and the result in this case was murder.
Right.
That's the problem we have. When the mayor says, if you give me new evidence, and I'll go to the prosecutor, and then we start laughing because the prosecutor is Ken Cotter, and he's the one that maintained Lieutenant David Wells and Tim Corbett, who is the subject of God knows what on the tapes.
Well, and you have to go back to what I said. I've launched more than one state police investigation
Yes.
for criminal corrupt activity in the community. And the FBI's been involved. If you remember, Mario, when I first kind of came on the scene, I think I told you, I also went to the State Board of Accounts.
Yes.
Because of millions of dollars that I saw being funneled to certain people. So, we talk about new evidence or going to this place.
We've
that
been up
place.
that mountain before, bro.
When these reports come back to our community, they die and they're locked in a closet. They disappear. I mean, I could sit on my computer and pull you up numerous accounts of very, very serious investigations that came back to our community and disappeared.
Yep.
There's never any accountability, there's never any closure, and this is why things are so heated up in our community, because there is never closure.
And people are fed up with
The
it.
wounds don't heal,
They're fed up with it.
and it's just sad that nothing apparently can be done about it at this point yet.
Well, and then, of course, I don't think that our because our show is international, it's national, international, and so we're talking to people overseas. We're talking about Officer Neal, but the thing that he was finally charged with and arrested for, okay, I'm going to read you the affidavit of probable cause. Detective Tracy Rolfing, police officer with Indiana State Police, affirming under penalties for perjury, says that he has probable cause to believe Ryan O'Neal, the sergeant that shot Mr. Logan, Eric Logan, has committed the crimes of official misconduct, a level 6 felony, ghost employment, a level 6 felony, and public indecency, a class A misdemeanor, based on his involvement with a prostitute. A review of records indicate an event potentially criminal in nature that occurred May 2019 where Sergeant O'Neal, this is
A
month before the shooting, while Sergeant O'Neal was on duty in uniform and driving a marked South Bend police car. Following the review of these records, your affiant made contact with the witness victim. Jane Doe informed us of a sexual encounter she had with a South Bend police officer, Ryan O'Neal. She stated it occurred between Easter weekend 2019, April 21st and June 3rd. On the night this occurred, Jane Doe stated she walked in the street trying to make money when Officer O'Neal pulled up in his police car, was in uniform, asked her what she was doing. She told him she was trying to make money. Jane Doe stated Officer Ryan O'Neal then asked her what if he gave her some money to do something. She stated she got in Ryan O'Neal's police car. She stated Ryan O'Neal picked her up in the area of Calvert and Michigan Street in South Bend. She stated Officer Ryan O'Neal drove to an ATM and got $20. ATM have cameras. She's in the police car, the prostitute, he's getting $20 out. Jane Doe stated she tried to get $50 from him, but he was cheap, her words, would only give her $20. Jane Doe stated after the ATM, Officer Ryan O'Neal drove to a big tree, they got in the car, stated Ryan told her not to take her clothes, but pull her panties down and bend over. She did what she was told, and whatever. I mean, had sex, okay? Actually, he masturbated on her.
Right.
And, which is really and she talks about the dress. They got back to the police officer, he drove her home. She stated, she asked his name as she was getting out of the car. And he told her, hey, this happened, this is my name. The affiant reviewed the Avail Web GPS system for South Bend Patrol Vehicle number 3020, assigned to Sergeant Ryan O'Neal. The GPS coordinates collected and matched the account given. Shows that Ryan O'Neal was at the Flagstar ATM at approximately 2:39 a.m. on May 16. Security vision footage from the Flagstar Bank ATM shows a police officer driving squad car number 3020, making a transaction at 2:40, and had a passenger in the back seat of his vehicle sitting behind him. So in the end, he gets fired for having a prostitute in the car. The chief claims, Chief Ruskowski, on the news, was it just me? Did he say, I don't know, I don't know how did this happen? Or?
He said something to the effect of, I'm finding out about this as you're finding out about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know this because the state police also did this investigation. Now, you got to remember that was said. After that, I was contacted by two very reliable sources that said, hey, look, this is a lie. 3 South Bend police officers were in fact tied up in this investigation somehow, and 3 officers are no longer with South Bend Police Department. And I was told that all 3 officers were basically called by the chief and told, hey, look, either you resign or we take you to the Board of Public Safety and you will be terminated, okay, for the wrongdoing, whatever it was. Supposedly 2 of those officers are now employed by Mishawaka Police Department.
I heard that.
And I'm also hearing rumor that O'Neill himself may have been hired by Mishawaka
As a
Police
civilian employee.
as a civilian employee until all of this blows over and they can put him on as a police officer. Now, I think if and when that comes out, I think the citizens in Mishawaka, number one, are going to have a slight issue with it. But I think the people in South Bend will also have an issue with that as well. I mean, stop and think about this. So in May, mid-May, a month prior to him shooting and killing Eric Logan, he was in a squad car with a prostitute. Supposedly another officer came forward and brought this to light to the internal affairs and to the chief, I assume.
Right.
But yet, a month later, he had not been reprimanded, and he was still on the force and able to.
So, had he been fired, Eric Logan would be alive.
Had he been dealt with for the other complaints in prior years, Eric Logan would possibly still be alive today.
That-
Most likely.
And as a side note, when all of this came up about the shooting of Eric Logan, there was a public outcry. Eric Logan was a burglar or breaking into cars, and over $80,000 was raised for a GoFundMe.
Yes,
I
for the
wonder-
officer.
Yeah, for the officer.
Yeah.
I wonder how those people who gave him the $80,000 now feel about him.
Okay, they told him to give it back. They closed down that GoFundMe, and GoFundMe's basically told him to give the money back.
Is that recent?
Yes, that's recent. That actually came across my email sources that I have, and I went ahead and checked it, and that GoFundMe is gone. They have told him, no, you have to return this money. You cannot keep this up.
I mean, this boils down to
That
one
would be
thing.
all
Like you
that.
said, we're not here to crucify anybody.
We're not.
Not even O'Neill.
Right.
But,
Exactly.
but listen, there's a lot of very important unanswered questions
Oh, yeah.
involving this shooting still. And the family is not going to get any peace and any closing
Of course.
until these questions are answered. If they would have brought something substantial, some DNA proof that he even had the knife in his hand, for crying out loud, something substantial to say, hey, look, the officer's life was in danger. There's no question. Obviously, if there was video footage running, that would have been a different, it would have told the story. But if they would have brought something substantial and been able to prove and convince people that, hey, the officer had no other option, no other choice, it would be a different story. But they didn't do that. They came, and when questions were asked about the trajectory of the bullet that hit Eric Logan, and also the bullet that was less than 12 inches off the ground in the suspect vehicle, they couldn't give any answers. They, in fact, said, well, go read the report. But you read the report, there's nothing substantial in there that explains any of that. So there's a lot of things that need to be answered before this can be put to rest and the community have any kind of healing at all.
Well, I want to speak. First of all, I want justice for the Logan family. They had a family member that was killed under very suspicious circumstances. And even the report just creates more doubt in how this thing went down. But I also want to I get, just like you, Jesse, I've been at this long enough that whistleblowers are the source of your information and my information. The majority of the whistleblowers are law enforcement. And the reason they go to Jesse or to me is because when they've tried to go to city legal, or maybe the chief. We saw the situation with Lieutenant Newton, okay? Chief Rostowski pushed him out, okay? The complaint that as recently as yesterday, I had a white officer contact me and say, so they keep a racist cop like O'Neill, but they force the good cops out.
Right.
How do you think we feel? So it's not, and that's why I always want to stress to people, this is not get cops. I listen to, and Pastor Larry and I talk to a lot of the officers just that patrol our neighborhood. And we appreciate those guys. They look out for the church. We appreciate them. What we want as citizens is a city to keep good cops.
Right.
We want our police officers to know if they do the job, their promotions will be based on merit. We don't want them to see officers like O'Neill or Nepper who have documented histories of violations. You know, we got about 8 minutes left. We even talked about Nepper going into the home of Deshaun Franklin at 3:10 in the morning. Officer Nepper is the one who did the load and go, went into Deshaun Franklin's house. And let me take a minute, because I want to mention that real quick. Look at the people who are involved in this. Officer Nepper, and I'm looking for the IA report, because I have that IA report.
While you're looking, Mario, let's just think about this, because you said, you know, we want people promoted for merit, okay? And many of us realize that people get promoted for politics.
Oh, yeah.
Which leads us back again to the police tapes. Get rid of the black chief because they wanted to slip Tim Corbett in as the chief. When they found out that they were recorded and that these recordings existed, they could no longer follow through with the plan of putting Corbett in. So then they turned around and tried to run Corbett for county sheriff. And when they didn't think he could win that race on his own merit, they tried to throw Hurley in, who was the interim chief.
Who had been fired by Notre Dame for
they threw him into the sheriff's race to try to draw votes so that they could weasel Corbett in. And I put a quick stop to that, by the way.
You did.
And so these promotions are political appointed promotions.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like selling a seat
Yes.
to Congress. Now, that's why people are worried, because we are losing all our good cops.
Yes.
They're disappearing.
Yeah.
And the ones
Black
that
and white.
the ones we're left with are not necessarily all the best cops. A lot of them are the ones who have skeletons in their closet, and they are bought and paid for, and they're protected.
Yeah.
That's the sad part.
Protected meaning they can murder an Eric Logan and get away with it. Because that's essentially what's happened, Jesse. That's exactly what's happened here. So I want folks to understand, we have the facts to show that this should be brought to the attention of the Department of Justice. Because we just don't trust the local authorities here. We've climbed that mountain before, and it has not resulted in any meaningful change. We don't want the local prosecutor. We don't trust the city council to call for. You know, I want to tell you this. One of the things I said when the mayor was present last Friday night at WBS is there should be a call for the Department of Justice, and he didn't say anything. Well, if you remember Theo Robert, 5 years after he had an incident with a person that he was transporting in 2010, in 2015, the DOJ came in and prosecuted him for an assault on this inmate.
Right.
Well, we can't get them, the mayor and Chief Teachman is the one that called for the DOJ to come in against Theo Robert, who happened to be a black police officer.
Who had filed complaints.
Who had
against-
complained, he was the one that brought the Jonathan Ferguson issue.
Yes.
That's why, the one reason they went after him. But,
Retaliation.
but you can't call for the DOJ to come in for a shooting that we documented some real inconsistencies in this report. We have a real problem in South Bend, Indiana, folks. To me, the only resolution, we talked about the failure of the black pastors, we talk about people being bought out, the city council sitting on his hand, the county prosecutor being co-opted, and I mean, the only way that I see this thing changing is the DOJ to come in and do a thorough investigation of the shooting and possibly expand it into the South Bend Police Department as a whole.
Well, just like this investigation ended up into something else. And I think if they come do a thorough investigation, it is going to expand into a lot of things and a lot of different areas.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's where we got about 2 or 3 minutes left. I didn't mean to steal your thunder today. You've been kind of silent. You had a burst on there, and you kind of.
I'm just deep in thought and deep in prayer, about this because like you said, it's not every cop that's a bad cop. I mean, I counsel several officers, and when this all happened, there were 2 things that were said to me. Number one, we hate this because it's a few bad cops getting the entire department painted with the same terrible brush. And number 2, they all said the same thing as well when they said, Pete Buttigieg is going to let us all take the fall.
Well, he was the former mayor.
Right.
But now, Mayor Mueller, who is his handpicked successor, he has the reins now, and I don't know, after we talked last Friday, I'm not convinced that it's going to be anything different, because he started saying, well, I need, if you can bring me new evidence. It's like, new evidence, this is enough. 30-degree angle, and he said he threw the knife and I shot him. Not I shot him and he threw the knife, but he threw the knife and I shot him, which means there's no longer a threat for deadly force to your life. I grieve for the family of Eric Logan, because they're seeking justice and they don't think they can get it. And I grieve for our city. Because I don't think the city leaders, the elected officials, I hate to call them leaders because they're really not, they're our representatives, I don't think they understand that people aren't going to take much more of this. They're not going to take much. And that, when I left the city council, we got a couple minutes. I want you to pray us out. When I left the city council, when Pastor Larry and I left last Friday after the special prosecutor, I went to the officers and said, the best we can do for you is try and hold this thing down and bring justice.
Yes.
I don't want to see an officer hurt. Pray us out.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we come to you once again, Lord, thank you for this time. Lord, we thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to let people see truth about these issues. Lord, we pray for the Logan family, Lord, please keep your hand protection on them, Lord. Lord, give them reassurance and peace, Lord, your peace. Lord, continue to work in all of us. Lord, help us to have discernment and to find the truth and to make it known. All these things we ask for your glory, not our own. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. God bless you. Thank you very much. Tune in next week. Thank you, Jay. Hey, that pickup I was so jealous of your ride, man. This was donated.
I seen that.
It was